All right, here's a quick YouTube video on how to fix a jittery PlayStation 3 remote where it unexpectedly goes up, left, right, shoots, whatever. So the issue is, pull it apart. There's a screw right there you have to remove once you get it apart. Then you pull this circuit board out, flip it around, being careful because of the joysticks. And the main issue is here, where these connections touch those connections. So there's two issues here. One is likely a light layer corrosion, and the other is there's a little piece of foam underneath that board ribbon cable that presses it up against that piece right there. So what we're gonna do is clean these with alcohol, rub them with a light toothbrush, clean it with alcohol again, and then put in a thicker piece of foam. Here's the ribbon cable flipped with that piece of foam. And luckily the box I got with the new batteries comes with some pretty nice foam, so I'm going to use that to make a slightly thicker one. Lay the old foam on the new foam, see the difference in thickness, and cut to shape. There's the new foam stuffed in there. Now there's another issue, is because it's so much thicker, it's going to make the board not want to sit down flat against it. And you can see in there, even though the new foam's in there, how springy this is. And there's only that one screw way on this side to keep this board down, other than the original battery. And the original battery had these feet here that snapped into slots. And then on the other side, the battery sits into this pocket. Well, the new aftermarket batteries don't have those feet. And if they did, I'm not convinced all that would be tight enough to keep that board pressed against the ribbon cable. So what I'm gonna do is take the new battery that doesn't have those feet, and I'll show you here in a second. Okay, another thing to note, this is the worst place to do something like this with all the screws, but I'm used to it. Before you go any further, you need to make sure you get these buttons back in right, with the springs in the right location. If you look from the side, the little return spring right there needs to be in that location. From the other side, this needs to be snapped down into those little pieces that it doesn't really want to fit into. And then you want to make sure that each button feels about right. If you have a problem here, that's because something in here isn't right yet. I lay this temporarily here to kind of see where the foam needs to go to line up with where it is underneath. And you can see it's pretty much in line with the reset button here. Connect the battery first to this half of the controller. Make sure you put that screw back in. And you can see this piece of foam I put on the battery, that when it lands here, will roughly be lined up with the foam that was underneath. And from the side, to make sure that that board is pressed down and makes a good contact. The other thing you got to make sure is that this little hole right there is a reset button, and there's a little plastic insert right here that needs to be orientated just like this, where the buttony part of it is south of that mounting hole. If it's flipped around and north, it won't make good contact with that little silver button there that says SW1. And then after the battery's connected, stick this up here in its home. It might help if you used glue or something because it kind of fits loose sometimes. But what I'll do is I'll just kind of hold it there, and then as I assemble it, I'll assemble it so it'll be upside down and gravity will be holding the battery in the correct location. And then while you're doing that, you got to work these number 2 buttons into those slots, which is really painful. And what I do recommend is once you get all snapped together, make sure all the buttons feel good, these 4 buttons here, before you start putting screws in, because they're really easy to mess up. Once you get the orientation kind of like this, where everything seems kind of lined up, then you got to use a little bit of force to kind of push the 2 halves together. As you do that, it should more or less make what I would define as happy snapping sounds as opposed to plastic breaky sounds. Now the reason this will never over here stay flush is because all that extra foam in there is trying to force it apart, which is kind of good because it's going to keep the connection good. But now that everything's good, you'll check these buttons, make sure they all feel the good and the same on each side before you proceed any further. And now you can see the controller works good. It's not shooting. As you try and warp the case of the controller, it's not shooting and throwing grenades, except for the zombie killing me. So anyways, that's a fixed controller. Now, I thought it was just the battery. When you Google it, the first thing it says is, well, maybe your battery's dead. Hit the little reset button. None of that worked. I got a new battery, put the battery in. I thought it was better, but really it was just because I tampered with it. Shortly after, it started acting up again. But once I cleaned the connections and put in the thicker foam, it operates a whole lot better now. In fact, flawlessly. So anyways, you know, after about 3 hours of pulling this apart and putting it back together 100 times before I was able to be good enough to do it in 5 minutes, you know, you can buy a aftermarket controller set for about $25. But this is going to be the Sony original, you know, durable controller. So that's why I tried to fix it instead. Anyways, good luck with your controllers.